Hello everyone, so this is a screencast that is going to be focusing on creating a positive classroom environment. And again, I want to warn you that I have a dog who may start barking, and I'm hoping that he won't. His name is Pushkin, by the way, so if he decides to assert his doggy ideas into my presentation, you know that they are Pushkin's ideas and not mine. All right, so how do we create a positive classroom? And I want us in particular to be using theory or theories to guide our thinking, or actually a theory and research to guide our thinking. All right, so let's get started. It's the first day of school, and you're so excited. You've created this beautiful classroom. Look how beautiful it is. You want students to come in feeling very positive. So you are going to be asking yourself, hopefully you have asked yourself, how do you want students to feel when they walk in the room? What in your environment fosters those feelings? And what can you do to foster those feelings in terms of what can you do in terms of your behavior that would foster those feelings? So let's try to figure that out. Is there a theory that can explain how and why students need to feel positive in the classroom? And sure enough, there is. And it's one that you may be familiar with. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the other one is we're going to pull from what we've learned and some new things about neuroscience. So first, let's start off with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You may remember from psychology that there are, or from your psychology class, that there are 3 or 5 levels associated with it. Or you may be more familiar with the more expanded view of hierarchy, of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that involves 8 levels. They are broken up into 2 major categories. The first being basic or deficiency needs. So in these, we have the need to fulfill our basic needs. That includes the physiological needs of just getting enough sleep, getting enough food, getting enough to drink. Those reflect our physiological needs. There are also safety needs. So we want to feel safe. We want to have shelter. We want to know that we're not going to get hurt. And then there are some social needs. So we want to feel like we belong, that someone is going to care for us, that we want to be attached to someone or a group of people. It's a basic need. And then there's the esteem need. So we want to feel like we are respected for the things that we can do, that that if someone were to look at what I can do, they understand what I can do or what I can do best. So if I'm a good jumper, I want to know that someone, maybe the teacher, knows that I'm a good jumper. If I'm able to sit quietly, I would love it for someone to recognize what I am able to do. And then there's cognitive needs. So I not only want to show what I can do, but I want to be able to show that I can learn, that I can develop cognitive skills, thinking skills. So I want to show that I can be successful in this way, but I want to be able to do it in a way that is safe for me, that I'm not always going to fail. So I need support. I don't need to have things made easy. I just want to have time to learn that material and support in learning that material. So these are the basic needs. Actually, the cognitive is in the growth needs area. I won't go over the others, the aesthetic and the self-actualization and the transcendence, but I do think that the cognitive is within the realm of what we do, especially as elementary school teachers. So it's important for you to know that these are some needs that students have. And because they are needs, that means that they can engage in behaviors to fulfill those needs. So it's a motivation theory. So if I don't have food, then I am going to do things that's either going to help me get food or whatever, to, help me cope with my not having food. So I'm going to engage in some kind of behavior. So when you look at this classroom, this is a classroom that I found on Pinterest, and you can find a whole bunch of examples of teachers showing off how beautiful their classrooms look. And this one's beautiful. Look at it. It's colorful, it's orderly, it has lots of storage space, lots of bright sunlight. It's wonderful. It's clean. It is wonderful. But we need to look at it more critically. And does this environment provide for the basic needs? So some of the things that we want to be thinking about is this environment warm or cool, too warm or too cool? It would disrupt the physiological needs that students have. Is there water available for when students get thirsty? Because if they get thirsty, that becomes a need, and they will engage in behavior or they will engage in behavior to get that, or engage in coping behavior because they don't have it. Is the bathroom marked and accessible? So can they get to it when they need to? Can they go to it when they need to? Can an English learner find these things if needed? That should be a question mark. But yeah, you want to be thinking about that. You can have all of these things available, but if the student can't read it or can't identify it, then they may not be able to satisfy the basic needs. You may also want to be thinking about belonging and competency. Do students feel like this is a safe space for them? Do they feel like they belong? This is a sense of social, that they are accepted as a part of the family. What in that environment would let them know that they are accepted and valued and part of that environment? And how about competency? So these are the things that you want to be thinking about when you look at a classroom. How can I meet the student's basic needs? And that's exactly what I would like you to do, is I want you to think of some things that you could have in your classroom or display in your classroom that would meet students' physical needs, their safety and security needs, their belonging needs, and their competency needs. And make note of them, generate some ideas, and bring that to class so we can have a discussion about it. All right. So there's more, right? I want to talk about the neuroscience of it. And in particular, I want to talk about how do we help students feel positive, but also be able to self-regulate. We want students to be able to adapt to the environment in a positive and productive manner. And so for this, I turn to Daniel Siegel's work, and he's written a number of books, and one that I am referring to for this lecture is called The Integrated Mind. Daniel Siegel comes from UCLA, or he works at UCLA, my alma mater. Go Bruins! And so he's been investigating how the brain can help understand trauma in children and adults. And so he's done a lot of research on the brain and used research of others to help him understand how the brain works. And so as we begin our journey, we're going to revisit what we know about the mammal versus reptile brain, but we're also going to be introduced to this idea of the left versus right brain. But before we get started, I want to give you a problem. Imagine you have a couple of kids that start fighting, and they're causing all kinds of mayhem. What do you do? Before you act, I would like you to think, and I want you to think specifically about some of the stuff about neuroscience. But I'm going to introduce you something new, too. So I want you to know something about non-cognitive skills. Non-cognitive skills is getting quite a bit of attention lately because what we're learning about it is very, very important to what we do as teachers, but also very, very, I guess, disheartening as well. So there are a lot of skills associated with non-cognitive. So non-cognitive, what does that mean? Cognitive, you may know, means thinking. So non-cognitive skills is associated with non-thinking skills, or in other words, non-academic skills. So when you see it in research, they're referring to non-academic skills, such as self-control, social skills, and how do students approach learning. And what we're learning is that these non-cognitive skills can affect cognitive skills in a major way. And in fact, what we're finding is that cognitive skills, if students come into kindergarten with some strong cognitive skills, that is, they can read, they can do some math, that all those gains can be overridden by non-cognitive skills. So in other words, if they don't have self-control, if they don't have good social skills, if they don't have a way to, an adaptive or a good way to approach learning, then all of those, that ability to read and to do math is going to fall flat, especially in the beginning and then later on. So this research that I'm sharing with you is comes from the Early Education Gaps by Social Class and Race Start USA Children Out on Unequal Footing. So I didn't read that right. Let me try it again. Early Education Gaps by Social Class and Race Start U.S. Children Out on Unequal Footing. So, and what they found is that low-income and less educated children enter school with fewer non-cognitive skills. So that means they're going to have trouble being able to be pretty good students in the classroom, even if they can read and even if they can do some math. They're going to have some problems being a good student in your class. And the effects of this goes well beyond what happens in school. In fact, there's another study that I don't have cited here. It's another study that found that there's Pushkin. I don't know if you can hear him. Hopefully, Pushkin, ticha. That ticha is Russian for calm down. That shows that comparing high school graduates who have poor non-cognitive skills fare worse than high school dropouts who do. So these non-cognitive skills are important because if you graduate with not having them, you're less likely to stay in a job because you can't persevere in the job, or you don't know how to resolve conflict very well, or you can't control your impulses very well. So this is very, very important. And given what the research here is saying, some students come to school unprepared. But what we know about the brain, that doesn't mean that they have to stay that way. We know that they don't have to stay that way. We can do something to actually help them out. So let's review what we know about the brain. Chica. We know that the brain has three parts, the older and the newer parts. Pushkin ticha. The reptilian brain is responsible for the physiological needs of the student. So it's responsible for strongly the fear response. If they are confronted with something that frightens them, they're either going to flee, fight, or freeze. We know that the limbic brain is associated with emotions. So if they get really emotional, that could be something that leads them to, decide whether or not to fight or flee or freeze. The neocortex is associated with the thinking brain, and it's the neocortex that can override the lower parts of the brain. So even if you're afraid of a test, your neocortex can kick in and say, hey, don't be afraid. Even if your limbic system says, I'm really angry that she took my pencil, your neocortex can say, hey, calm down. There might be a better way to solve it than to fight. So your neocortex can play a very important role. I want to introduce you to what Daniel Siegel says, the idea of the right and left brain. And you've probably heard this already. It's kind of common, sort of like learning styles, although people have, neuroscience people have been cautioning people to think that certain parts of the brain are associated with certain behaviors and thinking. We know that they can start out this way, with the right brain being associated with holistic thinking, with emotions, but it doesn't have to stay that way. So I often use the word that the right brain is associated with these kinds of behaviors. So, and it's true, the right brain is often associated with nonverbal kinds of behaviors, or being able to read nonverbal cues. So was that facial expression a sign that they are angry, or is it a sign that they are sad? They also can read tone of voice of happy, hey, I'm happy, or I'm angry. So the right brain is the one that typically is associated with making sense of those kinds of cues. The left brain is often associated with linear thinking, literal thinking, logical thinking, so finding out the cause and effect of things, and language. Notice that all of those ideas start with L. And so it's a good way to think about the left brain. The left brain is often associated with L-type things like language, literal thinking, linear thinking, logic. It is involved with the letter of the law. That's what it likes. The important thing that I want you to recognize is that the left brain is associated with language, and the language is an important tool in helping override the limbic system. So you need language to make sense of why you might be emotional in the first place, and then once you've identified it, calming down. So what we know is that children need the environment to facilitate self-control and approaches to learning and social skills. The environment plays an important role in developing it. Like we learned about the brain, the environment can help us learn how to be more in control of ourselves, have a better approach to learning, and to develop socially appropriate skills. It is the environment that helps develop our neocortex, because remember, it takes 25 years on the average for the neocortex, especially the prefrontal cortex, to develop. And once we develop that cortex, we can override the limbic system. So it's very common that when you see students that are crying or being or kicking or engaged in strong emotional responses, it's their limbic system and their lower brain, the reptilian brain, that may be activated. And what we need to do is to help them develop the skills and the neocortex to override that system. So what can we do? So I'm going to go over 3 areas. There's many ways that we can deal with it. And in class, we're also going to talk specifically about how we can deal with these. But here we go. How do we help develop students' self-control? Well, one way is to teach and practice breathing exercises. We want students to recognize that they are in control of their bodies. They may be aware that they can control, that they can walk and they can run, but they may not be aware that they control some of the internal functions that's going on, in particular, their emotions. But they can also control their breathing to some degree, not completely, but they can control how fast they breathe. And they can control their heart rate if they develop that ability. But teaching breathing exercises is a great way to show that they can control themselves. And it's a great kinesthetic way to demonstrate their ability to control their bodily functions. So when you breathe in, your stomach will extend and your diaphragm actually is expanding to collect the air. And then when you breathe out, your diaphragm, your stomach, is being pulled in. And you can help them, hold their little hands over their little bellies to kind of like see that. And if you have them practice that, it's a good way for them to develop a sense that they can control their bodies. But when they get into times of stress or disappointment, this is a nice way to distract them from whatever is causing the disappointment. As we talked about with the brain overview, that neurons that or the cognitive limit, that you can only attend to so many things. So if they're in the heat of anger and they're upset, you want to distract them from what they're upset about. So getting them to focus on breathing might be a good way to get them distracted from what they're upset about, which may also in turn calm them down. So teaching breathing exercises can help develop self-control. Daniel Siegel talks about ways in which we can develop social skills. So when they get into that heated argument with a peer, how do you help them? So they're upset, they're full of emotions, their limbic regions is activating, their right brain is just thinking about, oh, I'm upset. How do you get them to calm down? Well, one way that you can do it is connect. And Daniel Siegel suggests is that you connect with their right brain. Let them know that you understand that they're upset. Only talk emotions for that moment. Acknowledge their emotions. Get them to talk about their emotions. And then you can redirect them to the left brain part, which is dealing with the literal and the logic, being able to explain the cause and effect. When their emotion is running and activated and they're upset, they may not know what caused them, which is true for a lot of us. If we're really upset, we kind of forget what was it that got me upset, because we're so emotional. We're not thinking left brain. So connect and then redirect. The other thing that he says that it's important to do is to get the students talking about what it is that they're feeling. Get them to name it. I feel angry, or I feel sad. I feel disappointed. I feel hurt. Get them to name it. So we're using the left brain and language part to help tame their emotions. The third thing that he recommends is that we engage, don't enrage. So in other words, get them to talk about, once they're beginning to calm down and they're using language to name it, get them to engage in the process of what they think they should be doing. Rather than our coming in and saying, you need to go stand in the corner, this is wrong, engage and saying, what do you think would be a good thing to do if someone hurts somebody else? What would be a good punishment or a good reprimand? How can you learn from this? So those are some things that you can do. And then lastly, use it or lose it. We want to get the students to be practicing good skills, non-cognitive skills. So it's always important for them to practice it even when they're not engaged in the emotional trauma of the moment. So if, practicing the breathing exercises on a daily basis, practicing how to, express their feelings on a daily basis when they're in a more left brain and when their thoughts are more in the neocortex region rather than in the limbic system. So use it. The more times you use that, you can use it in times of trauma. If you don't practice using it, then you're not going to develop it. Again, neurons that fire together, wire together. You want to create that practice. There are students who are not very good with words and may not be able to express themselves with words even when they are calm. So one way to do it is to provide symbols, and emojis is a great way to do that. So find some emojis and allow students to use that in place of words for the moment. How do we help students develop good approaches to learning? Well, we need to help them understand that the brain is growing. For little kiddos, their brain is still very much developing. And for some of you, it's still developing. So the brain is growing and it will be growing for a while. So they should never give up. The second thing is that they should know that the brain is plastic, not literally plastic, but it is plastic. That is, that it can change forever and ever. It will be forever changing. And that means that what they are now is not likely how they will be by the end of the day or by the end of the school year or by the time they go to middle school. Their brains can be anything they want if they put together or if they engage in deliberate practice. Deliberate practice can make things a lot better. So you can work on your math skills, you can work on your art skills, you can work on your literacy skills, but you need to work on it on a daily basis. So continued flexing those brain muscles. All right, so in class we're going to be going over how to develop student self-regulation. I think it's really important to develop those non-cognitive skills, what we can do in the classroom that will enable students to develop ways to self-regulate. So thank you for listening. I'll talk to you in class. Bye-bye.